Okay, so are you ready to dive into like a story that's Hollywood glamour but also like really raw? You sent us this article about Brooke Shields, and honestly, it really makes you think about how we talk about postpartum depression.
Yeah, and you know what's so interesting about Brooke Shields? It's like her story, it really shows you the pressure of being famous, especially for women in Hollywood. Because let's face it, it's a lot.
Oh, 100%. I mean, think about it. Brooke Shields, she was everywhere, right? The Blue Lagoon, Pretty Baby,
Yeah.
Endless Love. America watched her grow up.
Yeah, and that's what makes it like even more impactful that she was so open about her postpartum depression. It wasn't just some abstract thing. She was really going through it and she decided to share that.
And it wasn't like a mild case of the baby blues either. It sounds like she had a really tough time even before becoming a mom.
Totally, yeah. Miscarriage, IVF, it's a lot. And she went through all of that.
It's a lot to handle. And even after she had her daughter, Rowan, the postpartum depression, it hit her hard. I read her book, Down Came the Rain, and there's this one part and it just stayed with me. She talks about how she couldn't even look at Rowan. Like she just wanted to disappear. Reading those words, it's really powerful.
It's that feeling of just wanting to escape from everything.
Exactly.
And I think Brooke's honesty, it helped people understand how intense those feelings can be.
And by talking about it, she kind of started this whole thing, especially when Tom Cruise, well, he publicly criticized her decision to use antidepressants.
Yeah, it became this whole big debate. And, Tom Cruise and Scientology, they have their own, views on mental health.
Right, right.
It's a whole different thing.
It blew up in the media. Postpartum depression wasn't this quiet thing anymore. It was everywhere.
It was like people had really strong opinions on both sides. Some people thought Brooke was incredibly brave. Other people, they agreed with Tom Cruise.
But you got to admit, Brooke's response to Tom Cruise in the New York Times, it was pretty amazing. She was like, okay, you can have your opinions, but I'm dealing with something real here.
It was definitely a bold move. But you know what's really something? Even though they had that whole public disagreement, they actually, made up. Tom Cruise even apologized.
You don't see that every day, especially in Hollywood. But what I find really interesting is, that whole thing, it had this kind of unintended consequence.
Yeah, it's like by being so open, she made it okay for other women in Hollywood to talk about it too.
Yeah, it's true. And the article even mentioned some really big names who kind of followed her lead, like Britney Spears, Adele, Gwyneth Paltrow, even Rihanna and Kylie Jenner.
And it just shows you postpartum depression. It can happen to anyone.
Seriously. Like Adele, that voice.
Yeah.
But she said she felt so, inadequate as a mom.
Yeah, I remember reading that in Vanity Fair.
I mean, if Adele can feel like that.
Right. It makes you realize it can happen to anyone, no matter how successful you are.
And then there's Britney Spears, right? It makes you wonder if postpartum depression played a part in everything that happened to her.
Oh, absolutely. Especially, just a few years after Brooke Shields was so public about it.
I was thinking about that when I read Britney's book, The Woman in Me, the shaved head, the custody battles. It was a lot.
It's hard not to see a connection. And what's kind of sweet, the article mentions that Brooke Shields actually reached out to Britney Spears, offered her support.
Wow, can you imagine being Britney Spears at that time, going through all of that? And then Brooke Shields reaches out.
Yeah, that's got to mean something, right?
For sure. And Gwyneth Paltrow, too. Even she talked about it on her Goop podcast. Says she felt totally overwhelmed after having a baby. Even doubted if she could still act.
Wow, really?
Yeah. And for her, with that whole image of being, totally in control.
Yeah, Goop is all about, having it together.
Exactly. It just shows you how powerful postpartum depression can be. It can really rock you.
Yeah. And then you had someone like Rihanna, and she was talking about being worried about postpartum depression before she even gave birth.
That's so different now, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
It used to be this thing you didn't talk about.
Now it's like people are more open to talking about it, even expecting it.
And Kylie Jenner, she's interesting because she was so young when she became a mom, 20 years old.
And the article said her postpartum experience, it lasted a whole year.
A year?
A year. So it's not like there's this set timeline for it.
No, not at all. It's different for everyone.
But, even though it's great that celebrities are talking about this more, we have to remember that they have a lot more support than most people.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They can afford therapists, nannies, all of that.
Right, right.
Most people dealing with postpartum depression, they don't have those kinds of resources. It's like we're seeing these little pieces, right?
Yeah.
Each story, it's just one part of this big, complicated thing.
Right.
But there are so many other stories that we never hear. And what's interesting? The article, it kind of connects Brooke's postpartum to, like, her childhood.
Oh, totally. When you think about it, she was so young.
Pretty baby.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, come on, that's a lot for a kid to deal with.
And all the attention, the pressure to look a certain way,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine.
It's got to do something to you, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
And even though you can't say for sure that her childhood caused her postpartum,
Right.
it makes you wonder.
It's like her whole life she's been dealing with people telling her who to be, how to look, and then being a mom on top of all that. It's a lot.
It really is. And you know that documentary, Brooke Shields? Pretty Baby.
Yeah, on Disney Plus.
Yeah, it's really good. You should watch it. It goes into all of that, like her life, her career.
It's about more than just postpartum then.
Way more. It's
Yeah.
about, like, taking control of your own story, not letting other people define you, which I think is something we can all relate to.
Totally. So it's kind of a hopeful story in a way.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, Brooke seems like she's doing great. She's got her family, her career, and she's still speaking out about mental health.
She's an inspiration. But it makes you think these celebrity stories, they're inspiring, but they also have all this privilege mixed in.
Right. Like, it's easy to say just get help when you could afford any therapist you want.
Exactly. So it's tricky. Does hearing these stories make it easier for other women to talk about postpartum depression?
Maybe. It's hard to say. But I think the important thing is that we keep talking about it.
100%. Every time someone speaks up, it helps to break down the stigma a little bit more.
And that's what matters. Making it okay to talk about it, to ask for help.
Well said.
Wow.
Well, that was a deep dive into Brooke Shields' postpartum depression and a whole lot more.
It really makes you think, right?
It sure does. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next time.